Kankandara. During my elementary and middle school years, I was a naive country kid who didn't know much about the world. I used to hang out with my close friends, A and B, and we did foolish things every day, leading a rough life. A and I were both completely abandoned by our families, but B's mother always made sure to be there for him. She maintained a strict attitude, but in her own way, she did a lot for B. One day, during our 8th grade year, there was a very intense fight between B and his mother. I won't go into the details, but it seemed to have emotionally hurt his mother deeply. As she was emotionally wounded, B's father returned home. At a glance, his father understood the situation and approached his mother, ignoring B. Seeing his mother, who had disheveled clothes and messy hair, staring blankly at the floor with dead eyes, B's father spoke to B. "You've become a person who can trample on others to this extent, haven't you? Don't you understand how much your mother cares about you?" His father hugged B's mother without looking at B and continued to speak. B responded angrily, "Shut up. Do you want me to kill you? Huh?" B had no intention of listening at all, but their father remained unresponsive and continued speaking calmly. B's father also said, "Do you think there's nothing to be afraid of for yourself? If you have something, show it." After a brief silence, his father spoke again. "You are my son. I know very well how worried your mother is about you. But if all you can do to her is trample on her like this, then I have something to say, not as a father but as a person, as someone unrelated. Let me make it clear up front that I'm saying this with the determination that I don't care even if you die. If that's acceptable to you, then listen." B sensed an intense determination in those words, but he taunted, "Just go ahead and say it. You know those areas in the forest that are off limits, right? Try going in there and venture deeper. The rest, you'll understand as you go. Try causing a ruckus in there like you're doing right now. If you can, that is. You know that place in the forest, right? The one that's off limits. Try going in there and venture deeper. You'll understand as you go. Try causing a ruckus in there like you're doing right now. If you can." The forest B's father mentioned was a small mountain near where they lived, with an area at the foot that resembled a dense forest or something like a thicket. The mountain itself was accessible, and the forest as a whole was normal, but once inside, there was a specific area marked as off limits. His father hugged B's mother without looking at B and continued to speak. B responded angrily, "Shut up. Do you want me to kill you? Huh?" B had no intention of listening at all, but their father remained unresponsive and continued speaking calmly. B's father also said, "Do you think there's nothing to be afraid of for yourself? If you have something, show it." After a brief silence, his father spoke again. "You are my son. I know very well how worried your mother is about you. But if all you can do to her is trample on her like this, then I have something to say, not as a father but as a person, as someone unrelated. Let me make it clear up front that I'm saying this with the determination that I don't care even if you die. If that's acceptable to you, then listen." B sensed an intense determination in those words, but he taunted, "Just go ahead and say it. You know those areas in the forest that are off limits, right? Try going in there and venture deeper. The rest, you'll understand as you go. Try causing a ruckus in there like you're doing right now. If you can, that is." The forest B's father mentioned was a small mountain near where they lived, with an area at the foot that resembled a dense forest or something like a thicket. The mountain itself was accessible, and the forest as a whole was normal, but once inside, there was a specific area marked as off limits. To put it simply, it was like drawing a small circle within a larger square and saying, "Don't enter this circle." It was highly localized. It was enclosed by fences of about 2 meters in height, with thick ropes and barbed wire on the fences, and white papers hanging all over the fences, like unique paper streamers, adorned with various sizes of bells. Because of this oddly localized restriction, the arrangement of the fences was irregular, and it was just extraordinarily unusual in every sense. Furthermore, On certain days, they would see several shrine maidens gathering at the entrance, and on those days, the entire vicinity would be off limits. Many rumors circulated, but the most widespread one was that it was a brainwashing facility of the cult. However, because it was quite a hassle to get to that point, there were hardly any stories of people venturing deep inside. Without waiting for B's response, B's father went upstairs with B's mother. B left the house and met up with their arranged meeting point with me and A. That's where we heard the story. For his father to say something like that, it must be serious. I heard rumors that it's some kind of cult hideout. If you get caught, they brainwash you. It's scary, but what are we going to do? Are we going? Of course, we're going. It's just our father's nonsense. Out of curiosity, A and I joined B, and the three of us headed there. We prepared some equipment, and it was around past midnight when we arrived at the scene. We walked into the forest with flashlights in hand. The path was easy to traverse even in light clothing, and we usually wore tabby socks, so it was comfortable to walk. However, to reach the specific location, we had to walk for nearly 40 minutes. However, something strange happened within just 5 minutes of entering. Around the same time we started walking, we began to hear a noise from a distance. The silence of the night accentuated the sound, and B was the first to notice. "Hey, can't you hear something?" I listened carefully, following B's words, and indeed, I could hear it. It was the sound of rustling leaves, and the sound of branches snapping, crackling in the distance. It was coming from afar. The fact that it was coming from a distance made it less frightening. We thought it could be just animals, so we continued walking without much concern. We thought it might be some animals before we thought of it as people. However, after thinking of it as animals and continuing for about 20 minutes, B noticed something again and stopped A and me. "A, walk a bit ahead by yourself." "Huh? Why?" "Just do it quickly." I looked puzzled but walked ahead alone, and then he came back to us. "Hey, what's going on?" "Explain." When we asked B what was happening, he said, "Be quiet and listen carefully," and went ahead by himself, then came back to us. After repeating this a few times, we finally noticed it too. The faint sound we were hearing from a distance seemed to be following our movements. As we walked, the sound walked. When we stopped, the sound stopped. It was as if it knew what we were doing. It gave off an eerie feeling. There was no light in the surroundings except for our flashlights. The moon was out, but it didn't make much difference due to the trees blocking its light. It wasn't strange that they could see our position since we had flashlights. However, even though we were walking together, we had to strain our eyes to see each other in the darkness. In such darkness, without any light, what were they doing? Why were they moving just like us? This is ridiculous. Is someone following us? I don't sense anyone getting closer. They've been at about the same distance the whole time. As I said, for the past 20 minutes since we entered the forest, the distance between us and the sound hadn't changed at all. It neither approached nor moved away. It maintained the same distance throughout. Are we being watched? That's the feeling I get. If it's the cult, they might have some weird devices. From the sound of it, it seemed like it was just one person who had been sticking with us all along. After stopping for a while and thinking, we decided it would be dangerous to try to identify them, so we cautiously continued forward while keeping an eye on our surroundings. We had been followed by the sound all the way, but when we finally saw the fence, we no longer cared about the sound. More than the sound, what caught our attention was the state of the fence, which was utterly baffling. It was the first time all three of us had seen it, and it exceeded our imagination. Simultaneously, a thought occurred to us that hadn't been there before. Even for us who usually dismissed things like spirits as nonsense, what lay ahead appeared to be something not grounded in reality. Moreover, it seemed incredibly dangerous. Could it be that this place was infamous for something like that? For the first time since entering the forest, we started to think that maybe we were in a dangerous place. K, are we supposed to break through this and go further? This is far from normal. Shut up. Don't freak out over this. Yelling at me and A, who were unnerved by the strange appearance of the fence, B began to break the fence with various tools he had brought. The sound of countless bells ringing was more impressive than the noise of destruction. However, we hadn't imagined it would be this tough. Our tools were too weak. In fact, the fence was unnaturally sturdy. It didn't budge as if it were made of some special material. In the end, we had no choice but to climb over, but thanks to the rope, climbing up was relatively easy. However, as soon as we crossed the fence, we felt an intense sense of discomfort. It was a feeling of confinement, like being locked in a cage. A and B seemed to feel the same way, hesitating to step forward. Still, since we had crossed the fence, we had no choice but to proceed. As we started walking forward to continue our journey, all three of us noticed something right away. The sound that had been accompanying us all along suddenly went completely silent as soon as we crossed the fence. To be honest, the eerie atmosphere was unsettling enough to make us not care about the sound anymore. However, A's words added to the discomfort. Could it be that, maybe, that thing has been here all along? Since there doesn't seem to be an entrance or exit around here except for what we can see from this side of the fence, maybe it couldn't get closer. There's no way. Even from the place where we first noticed the sound, we can't see anything from here. So, it can't know what we're doing once we're inside, right? Logically, B's words were correct. The Forbidden Zone and the entrance to the forest were quite far apart. I mentioned it took about 40 minutes, but we weren't walking leisurely, so in terms of distance, it would be a significant number. However, because the idea had crossed our minds that it might not be real, I couldn't completely dismiss A's words. After the unease that had begun to set in since we saw the fence, B was the only one who remained confident. Whether it's a ghost or whatever, if what you're saying is true, then it can't get out of this fence, right? So, it's nothing to worry about. Saying that, he continued forward. We walked for another 20 or 30 minutes after crossing the fence, and we began to see the opposite side of the fence when we noticed something strange. On specific trees, sacred ropes were tied, connecting 6 of them to create a hexagonal space. In addition to the paper streamers hanging from the fence, more official-looking ones were hanging here. And in the center, there was something like a donation box. The moment we saw it, none of us could speak. Especially for me and A, it felt like things were getting seriously dangerous. Even though we usually brushed off things like sacred ropes, we somehow knew what they were typically used for and had some knowledge about it. In that sense, the reason for this area being off limits was undoubtedly related to the site before us. We had finally come to this place. What your father mentioned was probably about this. We can't just go on a rampage. It's clearly dangerous. But we remained unfazed by the stern atmosphere. It doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. Let's just take a look at that box. Maybe there's treasure inside. B passed through the rope and entered the hexagonal area, approaching the box. Although we were worried about what we might do more than the box itself, we followed him. Perhaps because it had been exposed to the elements, the box was covered in rust. The top had a lid, and it had a mesh through which you could see inside. However, there was a board beneath the lid, so we still couldn't see inside. Additionally, there was something written on the box in chalk or something similar. It was probably a family crest or something of that sort, but on each side, front, back, left, and right, there were several different crests, and they were all different. There wasn't a single duplicate. I tried to examine the box cautiously, making sure that both me and A avoided touching it as much as possible. Even for B, who was touching it, I warned him not to handle it roughly. It seemed like the box was directly anchored to the ground because it felt surprisingly lightweight and wouldn't budge. After inspecting it closely to figure out how to see inside, I noticed that only the back panel seemed to come off. Okay, this part comes off. We can see inside. B removed one side of the box. and me and A peered inside from behind him. Inside the box, there were vase-like containers placed at the corners, and they contained some kind of liquid. In the center of the box, there was a wooden stick about 5 centimeters long, with its tip painted red. These shapes appeared in this manner on all 6 sides, with only the parts connecting at 4 points painted in red. What is this? Toothpicks? Hey, there's something inside those vase-like things. It's kinda gross. We came all this way for toothpicks and vases? I don't get it. While B and A only lightly touched the vase-like containers, B picked one up, smelled it, and examined it more closely. After putting it back, he reached out to touch the shapes. However, whether it was because he was sweating or for some other reason, his fingers briefly stuck to them, causing the shapes to shift when he pulled his hand away. In that split second, from the direction of the faintly visible fence further back at the hexagonal point, there was an incredibly loud ringing of bells. We all exclaimed, "Whoa," and were taken aback, looking at each other simultaneously. "Who the hell is it? Stop messing around." B started running in that direction. "Idiot, don't go there." "Hey B, it's dangerous." In a rush to follow him, I tensed up, but B suddenly stopped and remained motionless, shining his flashlight ahead. "What's going on?" "Hey, what's wrong?" While we were talking, we hurriedly approached B, whose body had begun to tremble involuntarily. "Hey, what happened?" As I said this, I glanced at the direction where the flashlight was pointed. B's flashlight was illuminating one of the trees among the rows of trees near the base. From the shadows, a woman's face was peering out towards us. Half of her face was sticking out, and she was looking at us without squinting, with her mouth wide open, revealing her upper and lower teeth, while her eyes remained fixed. Holy shit. We couldn't tell whose scream it was, but all 3 of us simultaneously turned around and ran. Our heads were blank, and our bodies acted on their own as if they were taking the best course of action. There was no time to look at each other, and we each desperately rushed toward the fence. When we saw the fence, we immediately jumped over it and hurried back to the entrance. However, in the chaos, I seemed to be struggling to climb the fence and wasn't coming toward us. A. Hurry. Hey, hurry up. While waiting for A, me and B didn't know what to do. What was that? What the hell was that? I don't know. Just shut up. We were in complete panic. And then, the deafening sound of bells echoed with tremendous volume, and the fence started shaking. What? Where is it coming from? Me and B were in a state of panic, but we checked our surroundings. The sound and the shaking of the fence were getting increasingly intense, seemingly coming from the direction leading into the mountains, and it was getting closer. This is bad, really bad. Is it here yet? Hurry up. We knew our words were only making A more frantic, but we had no choice but to rush him. I desperately climbed the fence, and just when he was about to reach the top, something unimaginable happened. Me and B were too panicked to see it coming. Oh God. I suddenly jumped down from the fence, collapsing in front of me and B. At that moment, we noticed that our own bodies were trembling, drenched in sweat, and we couldn't even speak. A, realizing the danger, looked back at the direction from which we had come. Following the line of the fence leading into the mountains, and shockingly, on our side, she was clinging to it. It was not just her face, she was entirely naked, with only her upper body visible. She had 3 right arms and 3 left arms. Using them dexterously, she was gripping ropes and barbed wire, and her mouth remained wide open, resembling a spider crossing its web, moving towards us. It was an unimaginable terror. Fuck. A, in a moment of panic, jumped down from the fence, collapsing in front of me and B. We immediately helped A to his feet and then sprinted back towards the entrance. We couldn't see behind us. We just focused on what was in front and ran desperately. Even though it shouldn't have taken more than 30 minutes to reach the entrance at full speed, it felt like we had been running for hours. As the entrance came into view, we noticed figures there. No way. All three of us suddenly stopped and held our breath as we observed the figures. We couldn't tell who they were, but several people had gathered. It wasn't her. As soon as we realized that, we started running again, rushing into the midst of those people. They said, "Hey, they're coming out." Could it be? They actually went to the other side of that fence? Hey, hurry and let the wife know. The people who had gathered were in a state of agitation, and they rushed toward us. We couldn't immediately process what they were saying because all three of us were still in shock, our minds completely blank. They led us to their cars and drove us to a meeting place, which was usually used for gatherings, even though it was already past 3 a.m. Inside the building, my mother and older sister were there, and A's father was there too. B's mother was different from the others. I had never really had a conversation with her. However, even my mother, who was usually emotionally distant, was crying, and A's father had a look on his face that I had never seen before. B's mother apologized. "I'm so sorry. This is all my husband's, and ultimately my fault. I'm truly sorry. Really." She bowed her head repeatedly. Even though she was from another family, it felt uncomfortable seeing a parent behaving like that in front of their child. A's father said, "Enough already, dear. Everyone is safe now." My mother also said, "That's right. It's not your fault." After that, the parents took over the conversation, and we were all just sitting there in a daze. They didn't provide any explanations, and the meeting ended just like that. The next day, around noon, I was awakened by my older sister, and she looked more worried than she had the night before. "What's going on?" A call from B's mother. "Things have taken a turn for the worse." I took the receiver and answered the phone. She shouted at me with great intensity. B's acting strange. What did you guys do last night at that place? It wasn't just going to the other side of the fence, was it?" The conversation was tense, and I hung up the phone temporarily. I headed straight to B's house with A, who had received a similar call, and together, we questioned B's mother. According to her, when B returned home last night, he suddenly started screaming about his arms and legs hurting. He couldn't move them, and he fell down with his limbs stretched out, writhing in pain in that position. His mother tried to help, but he kept screaming, unable to articulate what was wrong. She managed to get into his room, but he continued to scream in agony, so she called us, worried about what might have happened. After hearing this, we immediately rushed to B's room, where we could still hear his screams coming from upstairs. "It hurts, it hurts," he repeated. When we entered the room, we found him in the same state, with his arms and legs extended, writhing in pain. "Hey, what happened? Pull yourself together. What's wrong?" Despite our attempts to communicate, he just kept repeating, "It hurts," and wouldn't even make eye contact. What was happening? Me and Day were completely baffled. After a brief conversation with B's mother in the hallway, she took us aside and spoke in a calmer tone, asking us, "Tell me what you did there. That's how we'll figure everything out. What did you do last night at that place?" Although we understood what she wanted to know, recalling those events and explaining them seemed painful. Moreover, the memory of what we had seen overshadowed any thoughts about what might have caused B's condition. B's mother seemed to notice this and indicated that it was not about what we had seen but what we had done that was important. So, we tried to recollect last night's events and search for a cause. What had we seen? We had likely experienced the same thing as B, but what had we done? Our actions were very similar to B's. We had touched the box, handled the pet bottle-like objects, and even interacted with the toothpick-like things. But then, it clicked for both of us, the toothpick. Only B had touched it, and he had altered its position. Moreover, he hadn't put it back in its original place. We shared this revelation with B's mother, and her expression changed rapidly as she started to tremble. She quickly retrieved a piece of paper from her drawer, gazing at it, and then made a phone call. Me and A watched, waiting for her next move. After speaking on the phone for a while, she returned to us, her voice trembling. They said they would meet with you immediately if we go there. So, prepare yourselves and go back. I'll inform your parents. Even if you don't say anything, they'll understand and prepare for it. Come back to our place the day after tomorrow. We were left puzzled. Who were we meeting, and where were we going? Our attempts to get more information were deflected, and we were promptly sent home. We returned home without knowing anything, but we were instructed to make sure to go. 2 days later, me and A, accompanied by B's mother, headed to a place we had never been before. B had already been taken there the previous day. It was not just a little far away, it was in a different prefecture. We spent several hours on a Shinkansen train, followed by a few more hours by car from the station. We arrived at a remote village deep in the mountains, far away from the town. From there, we were led to an even more distant location, a grand, ancient mansion. It was a massive, old estate with detached buildings and storage facilities, all surrounded by breathtaking scenery. B's mother rang the doorbell, and a middle-aged man and a young girl greeted us. The man had a somewhat shady appearance, dressed in a suit, while the girl, who looked to be older than us, wore white robes and a red hakama, the typical attire of a Miko, shrine maiden. In their introductions, the middle-aged man, apparently the girl's uncle, gave a common last name, but the girl introduced herself as Aoi Kanyo. At least that's how it sounded to me. Her name seemed unusual and difficult to comprehend, and she explained that it was not a name that most people would recognize. I'll say Aoi for her name for simplicity's sake. We were ushered into a vast tatami room, and the discussion began in an unsettling atmosphere that we still couldn't quite grasp. He is currently resting. Is this the child who was with him last night? B's mother answered, yes, these three went to that place together last night. I see. Can you tell us, were you able to converse with them? Where did you go? What did you do? And what did you see? Please provide as much detail as possible. We were suddenly put on the spot and felt confused, but me and Day managed to describe the events of last night as accurately as possible. However, when we mentioned the toothpick, he abruptly interjected with a commanding tone. Wait, what did you say? We were taken aback. What? I responded. You bastards. Did you dare to touch it? Did you alter its form? He leaned forward and shouted at us as if he were about to grab us. Aoi quickly stepped in and spoke in a voice as thin as a mosquito's. In the center of the box, there should have been a small stick-like object placed in a specific formation. Did you touch it? Did you change its form in any way? Yes. We touched it, and I think we might have altered its shape. It's not about touching it. It's about changing its form. Do you remember who changed it? Me and they exchanged glances and confessed that it was B who had touched and altered it. At this point, the uncle sighed and turned to B's mother. I'm sorry to say this, but your son is beyond help now. I didn't inquire into the details, but considering his condition, there could be other causes. I never imagined they would have touched it. No, this can't be. She seemed to have more to say, but she choked back her words and stared down for a while. We couldn't voice our questions, but we felt the same way. What did he mean by beyond help? What was going on? Seeing our confusion, the uncle sighed once more and began explaining. It was only now that we learned about the topic we had been yearning for answers about. The creature was known as Seprasis Kettler, roughly translated as living shapeshift worm or living morphing worm. Depending on the region and the generation of the speaker, it was called different names, such as Naridara, Kankanjurara, or Kankanderan. Most commonly, it was referred to as Dara. In unique lineages like theirs, the term Kankandara was more commonly used. It was a creature that existed in the realm of myths and legends, and little was known about it anymore. We can't pinpoint when or how this knowledge has been passed down, but the box has been moved and offered for generations in a cyclical manner. Different families have been in charge depending on the time. You noticed the family crests on the box, right? Those represent the families that have been offering the box's location over the years. Families like ours review the applicants, and it's determined through a council meeting. Occasionally, some foolish people volunteer, but it's primarily managed by the approved families. Other than the designated managers, nobody knows anything about the story of Kankandara. The nearby villagers are only told that there's a tradition, and the appointed contact in case of an emergency is communicated to them. This communication is done in the presence of a mediator, usually someone from families like ours, so that's how the meaning of the tradition is understood. Right now, our family is not the mediator, but due to the urgency of the situation, we received the message yesterday. It turned out that the person B's mother spoke to on the phone 2 days ago was from a different group altogether. After talking to B and the family, they ended up leaving the situation to this group. Usually, the box is moved to the mountains or the forest. You must have seen it for yourself. The 6 trees and 6 ropes represent the villages. The 6 sticks represent my family, and the jars placed at the 4 corners symbolize the 4 survivors. The shape formed by the 6 sticks is meant to represent the priestess. Why this particular format was adopted and when the box became what it is today, there is nobody alive who knows the details, including us. They went on to explain that this living shapeshift worm, or Kankandara, had a cycle in which it moved locations, and each time, the power of the priestess's family was transferred to the next generation. The box, the crests, and the rituals surrounding it were part of the mechanism to contain and control the creature. The specifics of the creature's abilities and the reason behind the ritual were unknown even to the priestess's family. It seems that the box contains an entity that has the power to shapeshift into the people whose body parts are inside. It's not just about the creature itself, but the fact that the box holds the pieces of the previous generation's priestess is also significant. This has been going on for generations as a way to contain this entity. The Kankandara is a parasitic being that feeds on the power of the priestess's family, and the ritual is a way to control it. The entity's feeding cycle aligns with the periodic relocation of the box. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks. The box, the creature, the rituals, and our involvement, it was all part of something much larger and older than we could have ever imagined. The entity feeds on the power of the priestess's family. By touching and altering the sticks within the box, your friend disrupted the ritual and, in a way, tampered with the power source that contained the creature. The Kankandara became uncontrollable, and it began to feed indiscriminately on those nearby, taking their limbs as sustenance. It's a dangerous entity. It can replicate the appearance and abilities of anyone whose body parts it consumes. It's vital that it's contained, which is what the ritual in the box were meant to do. But now, we have a more immediate problem on our hands. The Kankandara is still out there, and it's not going to stop until it's satisfied. We listened intently, but the implications of what we were hearing were staggering. The creature we had unwittingly unleashed was still on the loose, and it was taking lives. However, the prevailing theory is that the 4 survivors, the descendants of the priestess's family, conducted extensive research on everything related to calming the resentment. As a result, they came up with their unique format. Or so it seems. Regarding the fence, the bell is the only component that follows the traditional format. The ropes and others were apparently added by the recent manager. Uncle continued, in our family, there have been a few instances where we performed exorcisms on the Kankandara, but every single one of those people died within 2 or 3 years. Suddenly, one day, those directly involved in the incidents rarely survived. It's just that difficult. We were still trying to process everything when the situation took yet another turn. Mom, you must have some idea of how serious this is now. I mentioned it earlier, but if you haven't moved the sticks, we might have been able to do something. But this time, I'm afraid it's too late. B's mother, please, you have to find a way. It's my responsibility. Please, I beg you. B's mother didn't back down. Even though it couldn't possibly be her fault, she was bowing her head and pleading, desperate and resolute. We want to help too, but if you moved the sticks and saw her. You saw what the priestess who was eaten by the giant snake looked like, didn't you? You even saw her lower half, didn't you? Huh? Both A and I were confused by their words. Lower half? We only saw the upper half, didn't we? What do you mean by the lower half? We saw the upper half, but... This reply seemed to surprise Uncle and Owie. What are you saying? You moved that stick, didn't you? If you did, you should have seen the lower half. The priestess who appeared before you didn't have a lower half. Then, how many arms did she have? She had 6 arms, 3 on each side. But there was no lower half. Owie and Uncle exchanged glances, clearly taken aback. Wait, what are you saying? You didn't see her lower half? Are you absolutely sure? Yes. Uncle leaned in closer to us. Could there be no mistake? You never saw her lower half. We confirmed our answer once more. It was a puzzling conversation, and we were eager to understand what they were getting at. Then, Uncle suddenly turned to B's mother and smiled. Hey, there might be hope. This statement grabbed our attention, and both B's mother and we leaned in, hanging on his every word. Finally, they began to explain the significance of what we had witnessed. There are 2 actions that would incur the wrath of the Shrine Maiden's grudge. First, changing the form representing the Shrine Maiden is strictly forbidden. Second, one must not look upon the appearance that the form represents, which is the Shrine Maiden herself. In reality, once you move the rods, it's all over. You inevitably end up seeing the Shrine Maiden's appearance. However, for some reason, you 2 claim not to have seen it. Since anyone other than the one who moved the rods should see the same appearance, if you didn't see it, then that child likely didn't see it either. What do you mean by not seeing it? What we saw was, the Shrine Maiden herself remains unchanged. However, she is not the Kankandra. It seems she didn't have the intention to take your lives. She appeared not as the Kankandra but as the Shrine Maiden. That night was like a playful performance for her. So, the Shrine Maiden and the Kankandra are both the same and different? It seems that way. If the Kankandra hasn't appeared, then what's currently tormenting that child is, as Owie mentioned, merely a playful entity. Leave it to us, and while it may take some time, we should be able to handle it. The tense atmosphere that had prevailed until then seemed to finally ease. Just knowing that B would be safe was enough, and B's mother's expression at that moment was truly remarkable. It was a smile that seemed to release all the anxiety she had carried for these past few days. We will officially take care of that child. I'll explain everything to the mother later. You 2 should get cleansed by Owie and then head home. And from now on, don't be too reckless. After discussing B a bit more, her mother stayed behind, and we received a purification ritual from Owie before heading home. According to their customs, we weren't allowed to meet B, and we had no idea what they did for her. Whether she transferred schools or stayed enrolled, we didn't know. We haven't seen her since that day. Well, she didn't die, and she seems to have reformed and is leading a proper life somewhere. By the way, B's father never showed his face throughout this whole ordeal. We have no idea what he was thinking. A and I also quickly settled back into our daily routines. There were various reasons for that, but the biggest one was definitely B's mother's expression. It was a reflection of the hardship she had endured. It made us think about what mothers are really like. After this incident, both my family and A's family began gradually accepting us. We also naturally stopped doing reckless things. Some additional information we gathered. The Shrine Maidens who gathered on specific days were people from the households that became the consultation representatives. The Kankandra was considered dangerous, but it was somehow turned into a being resembling a god. The serpent, which was probably the god of the mountain or forest, made an appearance once a year during a festival, where they performed kagura dances and recited Shinto prayers. As for the sounds we heard while in the forest, it was because the kankandra was allowed to roam somewhat freely within the enclosure. However, the six-sided shape and the box acted as seals, so as long as you didn't tamper with the shape or the hexagonal enclosure, it would rarely appear. The location for the annual offering place was determined by some kind of rule, and they carefully selected the exact coordinates, making sure not to cross the borders. While generally, they couldn't leave the designated area, if there were enclosures like the one we saw, they could sometimes cling to the outside. That's about all we found out. It seems like they moved away from where we lived. I haven't confirmed it because I don't want to go back there, but about a year later, they started removing the enclosures, so I assume they're in a different location now.